removing inhalable environmental stimuli and increasing negative ions. What is the impact on C4A's VCS, and does that correlate with changes in gene expression? This presentation has been brought about by the support of many, to include Dr. Scott McMahon, Whole World Healthcare, Roswell; Dr. Richie Shoemaker, Surviving Mold and Progene DX; Dr. James Ryan, Progene DX; David Lark, Principal Mycologist, Graduate Microbiologist, Mold Lab, Envirobiomics; Gianna Rossini, Envirobiomics; Vince Neil, Mycotox Australia, supported by Steve Johnson and Chris Neal. One of the greatest achievements is that we have seen through both Dr. Shoemaker and Dr. Ryan is that there are changes in gene expression with environmental stimuli exposure. Now we can see what genes are affected by what environmental exposures, as the case studies are different to controls.
I hope everyone's enjoyed the presentation so far, and I'm hoping that between Dr. McMahon, Dr. Ryan, Dr. Shoemaker and ourselves, that we can help build on what's been presented so far. These are exciting times with Progene DX. The capabilities and the possibilities of what we can do, looking at things like cancers, inflammation, fatigue, autoimmune diseases, they can all be mapped and then tracked depending on treatments. This simply means that eventually, once Dr. Shoemaker and Dr. Ryan have determined what genes are triggered by what stimuli, the doctors will actually be able to tell us what we should be looking for, whether we're looking for endotoxins, polycyclic ethers, whatever it is. And then we'll need to go out and find it and then determine how it's going to be removed successfully. So treatments can then be successful. Does a simple VCS test correlate with anything that the doctors are finding? Changes in C4A, gene expression, etc. Do they show any correlation with the levels of the VCS testing that we're finding on site? Well, here in Australia, we've been able to show that 96% of cases where there is inflammation and the possibility of either CIRS or it's already been diagnosed, we can reduce the fails in those people within 60 minutes. What part do the high levels of negative and positive ions play that come from these machines we're using for purified air? Well, we do see some massive changes in inflammation. Here, when you look at this, we're seeing a client whose inflammation in the face was extremely high, as were her VCS fails. As you can see, no bags under the eyes, no laugh lines, what we would call in Australia, not happy Jean. So after 60 minutes of purified air, nothing else, no makeup being applied, look at the changes. The fails and the VCS were also reduced. Look at the bags now under the eyes. Inflammation is gone. Look at the laugh lines. Not every woman wants you to give wrinkles back, but if they're feeling better, they'll put up with it. Defining a reduction in inflammation with or without medical intervention. And here in Australia, not having access to the blood markers, we've still been able to show that exposure with purified catalyst air from a HCT280 or a 355 can promote changes within an individual showing evidence of CIRS. But Dr. Shoemaker says, show me the money. No, he doesn't. He actually says, show me the data. And he's right. So to this end, we enlisted the help of Dr. Scott McMahon. Julian from Australian Air Oasis sent across a HCT280 to Dr. McMahon to use in his clinic for purposes of testing. It was agreed that we'd have 2 of his staff members and 4 other patients spend 8 hours in his clinic, and they would do all the testing beforehand and do all the testing beforehand after, including bloods. The data collection of 8 individuals who've been diagnosed with CIRS, whose exposure was over an 8-hour period to this purified air, with of course blood markers taken beforehand along with VCS, except for patients 3 and 4. You'll note that no bloods were drawn there. Those biomarkers naturally included C4A. Sustained elevation of C4A is seen until definitive therapy is initiated normally, but here we saw something wasn't quite normal. Here we have 2 staff members with CIRS who've undergone more long-term data collection to include their C4A and TGF beta-1, both before and after, then a recollection after 6 weeks. So we had a better idea of what was happening long-term, because they go back into the office every day and work for 8 hours. All right, let's concentrate on the C4As. In patient 1, you'll see patient 1 went from 2,967 and in 8 hours with purified air from one of these machines, dropped to 650. In patient 2, the C4A went from 8,879 and dropped to 394. Both patient 1 and 2 had a reduction in VCS fails, but note in patient 5, no change in the VCS. But guess what? There was no change in the C4As and very little change in the TGF beta-1. So maybe that is showing us something. Now, of course, my thoughts could change when we see the data from ProGene-DX. But normal acceptable range for C4A, we've been told, is between 0 and 2,830. It would appear that that normal range encompasses a low level of microbial exposure, because here we have 6 individuals in a purified air clinic where the range is 197 up to 793. So in other words, somewhere between 200 and 800 in a clean environment appears to be the C4A levels from this very small group. And we might add that the rise in TGF beta-1 does show a mild correlation between fail reductions in VCS after the clean air exposure. This actually visually shows you what we're seeing. Client comes in, beginning of the 8-hour period, has a high level of fails in the VCS, and then hourly that either drops. In this case, there's a couple of times it's gone up in the afternoon, but that's when the individual has gone out of the office to do something in another part of the building. Then they've come back in and ended up in this case with 14 fails, which is a pretty good reduction. We thought we'd include this one because it actually shows that when they come from home, where in this case we know both of these, patient 1 and 2, are exposed in their home to microbial contamination. So they're coming in and their VCS levels are higher in the morning from home to when they're finished at the end of the day from work, except for 1 or 2 changes, but then that may be that they didn't work in the office for that day or they worked outside the clinic area. In Australia, 75 VCS datasets have been recorded so far, and further analysis will be undertaken in a paper which will publish 100 datasets from Australia and 100 datasets from Roswell, and seeing what happens and how they correlate between the areas. But what I would like you as doctors to realise is that you are limited. Only kidding. You record VCS results in your office, but your patient may actually come an hour away, 2 hours away, 20 minutes away. Their VCS at home can be different to what you record in the office. So what's the best way? Well, hang on, we have IEPs who actually go to site. Shouldn't we have them collecting the VCS data? Because they're giving you the real exposure. That's something that I'll leave open to you guys to talk about. I know that Michael's got his VCS unit, hasn't started using it yet, but maybe Dr. Shoemaker and the rest of you can chat about whether you want that sort of thing to occur with your clients or patients. Here you can see that our data collection shows various levels of improvements in VCS, and in some cases, none or very little improvement. But it does confirm that exposure to purified air and high levels of negative ions in 96% of cases that we've collected show a high level of reductions in VCS fails. Along with reductions in VCS fails, our clients have felt improvements in clarity, feeling more relaxed, and feeling just a lot better. In Dr. McMahon's Roswell clients, the VCS data collection is still ongoing, and the first 9 patients actually only had 1 one 14-inch lamp in the unit. The other lamp had died on its way across from Australia. That's now been rectified, so from 9 on, they have the same level of lamp system as we've used here in Australia. This is where I might get into trouble. Are we seeing a correlation between VCS improvements, C4A and gene expression? There's hints that we are, but further works need to be undertaken. This is not black and white, as you can understand. So today, Dr. McMahon will present the analysis of the VCS data collected in Oz and the US, and the presentation of what was found in the transcriptomic results will follow with Dr. Ryan. We hope as Dr. McMahon and his staff continue to build on their VCS data, along with looking at raw VCS data, if we can get it from contaminated buildings, we may be able to present more information on what CPDs are affected by chemicals/VOCs. And if time permits, between Dr. McMahon, a number of doctors here in Australia, we hope to be able to show results when these machines are used in the homes of families with autistic children. You might ask why? Well, because we're actually seeing a difference in a couple of our clients. And in particular, Lewis's mum. Her life has changed now. After 3 days, she can sleep at night. Her son had restless night sleeps, 9 hours. Mum was sort of just going downhill. Now things have improved. And this is what she wrote. I want you to have a look at this. Much better sleep, 11 to 12 hours, deeper sleep, less restlessness, no more nighttime coughs, increased appetite, very settled behaviour, engaging with his father, which he wouldn't normally do. After a car breakdown, and there was no complete meltdown. But when he got home, this is a little boy who cannot verbalise his thoughts, cannot put more than one word into what he wants. Pool, food, that's it. I mean, you can imagine mum's meltdown at that particular point in time. Son, 7.5, that's the first time he verbalised his thoughts. Repeating and learning phrases, da-da-da-da-da, this will be a game changer for us. Well, it's a game changer for her, but I think as a group, when we understand what's happening here, it can be a game changer for us as well. But as normal, I digress. Let's look at what we actually did find in the study.
And now to look at the VCS analysis, both in Australia and Roswell, along with gene expression in those tested. Can you please welcome Dr. Scott McMahon, who has an unusual way of administering VIP at 10 to 1. Ask him over a quiet beverage. So Dr. Scott McMahon and Dr. Jimmy Ryan.
Right. So Vince has already given us kind of an overview of the data that I'm going to present. I'm just going to show you all the graphs and slides and kind of explain it as quickly as I can. I have no financial disclosures to make. Although I see this really catchy sign here that says pure air for better health, I'm willing to sell that to anyone and have a financial disclosure. Anyone who like that?
Sure.
Aeroasis? Okay, me? All right, so I guess I do have a potential conflict of interest. Okay, so Vince and his crew out there from Aeroasis, it's not his crew, but Vince and the Aeroasis, Australia Aeroasis people sent a machine to me around the first of the year. And the machine had two 14-inch bulbs. Well, we'll talk a little more about that in a second, what actually was in there. But these are the 3 different studies that we've been doing since the 1st of January. And we don't have all of our data back, but we're going to present what we do have. So for 2 patients who are actually surge patients who work in the office building that I work, we put this machine in their office space for every day for like 6 weeks. And I know that both of them have water damaged homes where they live. And one of them had been on a binder and been treated for surge for some time. One of them was completely naive to therapy. I knew she had it, she didn't want to believe it, so I showed her that she did have it. It wasn't very nice of me, was it? We checked their labs, which were TGF-beta1, MMP9, and C4A, in the morning, and then 6 to 8 hours later. We checked their visual contrast sensitivity study. We had them do a quantitative roster of Dr. Shoemaker's 37 symptoms. So instead of just putting yes or no, they put like 100% or 70% or something like that. And then we also did the genomics. We did those in the morning, and then we did them again in the afternoon, and then we did them again 6 weeks later. That's the first study that we did. We also did their VCS every hour that first day to see if there was a trend, and Vince already showed you that data. The second study we did was with 7 patients, and we did basically the same thing for the first day. We checked their VCS, their symptoms, their labs, and their genomics in the morning, and then again after they've been in the room with the HCT 280 for 6 to 8 hours. And then the third study that Vince was alluding to is where there were 100 people that were in a room with this machine for 1 hour. So we checked their VCS, we put them in the room, we checked their VCS an hour later. So I'm going to just very quickly go through this data because I know you'd much rather listen to Lysander. Okay, as far as methods, we're using an HCT280. It's built by Australia Aeroasis and shipped over here by them. We use Aeroasis parts and tubes. As Vince was talking about, it came with 2 14-inch tubes that were both photocatalytic oxidation tubes, and they were what they call the low ozone tubes. But they also have bi-ionic generation. So there are positive and negative ions being emitted too. One of our tubes didn't work when we got it. We didn't realize it wasn't working until we put it in a dark room, and then all of a sudden we saw, hey, all the light bulbs don't light up. So it took us a little while to get a second tube. We couldn't get another one of the 14-inch tubes that was identical, so we instead were able to get a 9-inch tube that is a high ozone tube and does more photocatalytic oxidation and less ion production. So that's one reason that Vince's data and my data may be a little bit differently, because our machines are a little bit different in how they're producing, how they're filtering the air. So study number 1, just 2 people, and remember these are small studies at this point, so you can't take a whole lot of statistical significance from them, but they are pointing out trends. So the first 2 people, this is symptom improvement. So actually that is mislabeled. It shouldn't be symptom improvement, it should just be symptoms. And I don't have a pointer here, so I'm going to use this pointer. This is patient number 1, and this 50 means that she rated her fatigue in the morning of day 1 as 50%. And there are 3 different bar colorations. So blue is at time equals 0. The orange is at time equals burnt orange, time equals 6 hours, and the gray is at time equals 2 weeks. You will notice that there is no burnt orange and there is no gray. So at the end of the first day, her fatigue was completely gone. Her weakness was completely gone. She didn't have aches to start with. Her unusual pains were gone. Her ice pick pains were gone at the end of the first day, and again at 2 weeks. Now, in some of the other slides, you'll see these other colors, and they'll either be higher or they'll be lower. If they're higher, that means that they got worse. If they're lower, that means they got better. So these are just the 37 Shoemaker symptoms in order. And you see here, in tearing, she had an improvement. In morning stiffness, she had an improvement. In some of the other symptoms, it completely went away by the end of the first day in the office with this machine. And you'll see that there are no symptoms at 2 weeks at all. In fact, she stopped taking her binder because she felt so good. And this is really the only intervention that we did. Keep in mind also that after 6 to 8 hours in the office with this machine, she's going home to a water-damaged building, to her home, which is a water-damaged building, which she and her husband have been renovating for years. And I told them 5 years ago it was water-damaged. And they said, oh, look, it's water-damaged. She didn't work with me then. But you can see that she had some pretty impressive symptom improvement. Thirst went up. Oh, okay, 1 out of 37, that's not bad. Okay, patient number 2, this is the person who was naive to treatment. And you see that she actually had some symptoms getting worse. To be honest with you, most of those symptoms got worse when she got her blood drawn. And we drew blood in the morning, we drew blood in the afternoon, we had to fill out their symptom scores at that time, and she felt considerably weaker right after she got her blood drawn. But you can see that the overall trend is down. Her muscle aches and pains went up at 2 weeks. I'm not really sure why that was. Maybe that was just one bad day. But the overall for her was actually much better. We see that she has a few that are worse, and we did not put her on any kind of binder during this trial. You see the overall is that her symptoms are improving, although there's a blip at 2 weeks. Okay. This is the TGF-beta 1s over time, and I probably could have made this slide simpler. This point here is in the first day in the morning. This point here is the first day at the end of the day, And this point here is 6 weeks later. Okay. The gray is the average between patient 1 and patient 2. As you can see, in both these patients, their TGF-beta1 actually went up at the end of the day. And you might say, well, what's going on with that? Well, TGF-beta1 is complicated. You know, sometimes it's a pro-inflammatory cytokine, sometimes it's an anti-inflammatory cytokine. I don't think you can look at just that number and really draw any conclusion. What we do see is by the time we get to 6 weeks, they're roughly the same as they were initially. Now, C4A, however, is a lot more dramatic. The patient who was naive to therapy, her initial C4A that morning was almost 9,000. At the end of the day, it was about 350. And it's the same with with patient number 1. Hers started about 3,000 and hers was about 900 at the end of the day, which I think is pretty impressive. Again, the gray line is the average. And why is that? Well, again, it's n equals 2. We can't draw any too significant conclusions, but my thoughts are that perhaps this machine is pulling fragments, bacterial fragments, maybe mold fragments, out of the air. They're no longer breathing them, and it's not stimulating their innate immune system. Why would C4A drop so fast? Well, C4A in your body has a really short half-life. So if you were to go 6 or 8 hours without breathing in any, or much less, of those fragments that are immunogenic, perhaps there's no longer a stimulus to make that C4A. The complement system kind of calms down, and the C4A that you have just goes on to make other products. Just one minute's thought. Okay, MMP9 really didn't show a great deal of change over the course of the 6-week period. It was a little bit higher at the end of the day in patient number 2. So this is the genomics, and we're not finished with the genomics yet for these files. Jimmy, I sent him, 60 samples in about 3 weeks? Something like that. So sorry. And now I feel really bad after you explained yesterday all the work that you have to go through. It's almost like you need a raise, but I didn't say that. Anyway, the one slide that really stood out was this one, which has to do with defenses. I don't think that you can read that very well, but this is defenses. This is the first one, this is the second one, and this is at 6 weeks. And what we see this is just patient number 2, the one who was naive to therapy, is her defenses were pretty high at the beginning. By the end of the first day, had dropped, and at 6 weeks were roughly the same as they were at the end of the day. Now, defensins are chemicals which help macrophages fight off bacterial infection. So again, one postulate or one supposition you might make here is that she's now breathing in fewer bacterial fragments, and maybe that's why she's downregulating her defenses, because she's not having as much exposure. Can't say that for sure, time will tell, but that's what I'm drawing from the conclusion at this point. Okay, study number 2. Now this is n equals 7. The first 2 of these n equals 7 are the 2 people we just presented at their first time point and their second time point. The other 5 are people that only came in for a 6 to 8 hour period. They had their VCS and bloods drawn, and they did their symptom lists, and then they were put in a room with this machine, not allowed to leave. They ate their meals in there for 6 to 8 hours. They were only allowed potty breaks, and we timed them. We did.
How big was that room?
I'm sorry?
What was the square footage of that room?
Oh, good question. The square footage of the office that those 2 ladies were sitting in was about 160 square feet. The square footage of the room that we isolated these people in, it's the room right next door, is about 145.
Did you? I think you gave a cubic meter per minute rating, or was there a volume that it changes air?
I don't know that answer. That's a Vince question.
Yeah.
That would be very helpful to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because everything like an air cleaning device has a fan,
Right.
and that would be important to know for fragments versus VOCs.
Fair enough. Okay.
But it's supposed to be rated for 3,000 square feet, so we're getting massively.
Well,
cheap.
those numbers are fuzzy. I
Well,
want to
yeah,
hear
that's-
I want to hear the CFM or the metric conversion to that.
I will write it down.
So we're assuming that your office is contaminated? I mean, because if you put someone in a clean room that is completely clean, what's the benefit of putting in, one of these air sprayers?
All right. We had a contamination event toward the end of September of last year. They cleaned up, they changed our roof, and in the process, one night the tarp that they put over the ridge panel got blown off, and it rained that night. And so we are continuing to fight with the landlord, the insurance company, and the roofers, because nobody wants to pay for the remediation. And I would do it myself, but the problem is that there are 2 air handlers in that attic area that is directly above my office, and those 2 air handlers weigh several thousand pounds. I can't lift it. I tried, but it was got a hernia. So yes, and we did, thanks to Gianni and David Lark, we did some testing in our office, and we haven't changed that. And we're going to remediate, and we're going to retest, and then we're going to redo our samples. Study number 2. Okay, so this one is a little more complicated. This has actually 7 different patients and their average. The average is the brown here. The average is how much improvement they made. So in this case, like this patient here, this is patient number 2, when it goes down, that means they didn't improve. That means they got worse. When it goes up, that means they had improvement. So here, like this blue one here for fatigue is patient number 1, and that means she had a 50% improvement from the morning. So we had the morning score, say it was 100% fatigue. In the afternoon, if she only had 50%, that would mean a 50% improvement. So bars going up are good, bars going down are bad, bars going up way up are really good. And again, without going through all the individual symptoms, we'll just show that the vast majority of the symptom bars go up, which means they improve. I counted, there are actually 10 that go down. Considering there's 37 symptoms and 7 patients involved, doing the math, that's about 270 different possible ones that could go down. We've only got 10, so that's pretty good. So you can see all across the board that we had improvements. Okay, this is their average symptom improvement. So this is individual patients here, what percentage of overall improvement they had in their symptoms. So we averaged the morning and afternoon and subtracted that and got a percentage. And you can see that everybody had overall some mild improvement. And some had more than mild improvement. This is their TGF beta 1s over 6 hours. Again, in this group, we didn't do it for 6 weeks later. We just did it at the first time period and the second time period because we're only exposing them to the machine for 6 hours. And you can see that TGF beta 1s go up a little bit, but the overall average is about the same over 7 people. So not much change. For the C4A, however, you see that the average is actually pretty significant. I think most of the improvement you'll see in these 2 patients, but you actually do see improvements with everybody else. And that graph is kind of skewed a little bit because the one patient started at 9,000. Everybody else in the study had been pre-treated, and so their C4A levels had already come down from cholestyramine treatment. But they went down even farther using the AO. This is their MMP9, and again, there's really not much change in their overall MMP9. For some reason, the 6 hour for the first 2 patients isn't on there, but I already showed that. Okay, oh, wow, that's interesting. I don't know why that slide isn't there. Okay, so this is the genomics, which Dr. Ryan refused to present. So you're getting second best. Well, not even second best. Anyway, there were a few, again, trends that we see. There are just not enough patients yet in this trial to be able to give you significant differences or statistical significance. But this is a slide of glycolysis, and all these slides were made by Dr. Jimmy Ryan. And as has already been presented, blue, there we go, blue here means downregulated. The darker the blue it is, the more downregulated it is. And red, pinkish, means upregulating, and the more red it is, the more upregulated it is. So you can see there's a trend here in glycolysis from kind of a little blue, kind of a little pink, to more pink. In other words, perhaps glycolysis is starting to take off. This one is a little more clear. This is the ribosome large subunit. You can see that the average for these 7 patients on their genomics is that the large subunit is pretty much decreased. It's pretty much down-regulated, maybe not making as much protein as you might expect, and the average for 6 hours later is considerably more upregulated. In other words, it looks like these patients are getting ready to start making more proteins. And then we see the same thing with the ribosomal subunit. Now, why would that be? Going back to what Jimmy said a couple of days ago, I'm sorry, Dr. Ryan, going back to what he said is, when the cell is recognizing that there's a threat, that one of its mechanisms of protecting the cell is to downregulate things like protein synthesis and energy production so that, say it's a virus that's coming in, they can't take over the cell's machinery and just reproduce as effectively. So what this would suggest, if that's the case, if that's what's going on, is the cell is recognizing the threat. It's basically gone or is diminished, and so it's starting to go from this hypometabolism back into a more normal level of metabolism. Trends, not statistically significant yet. This is the BOLO, be on the lookout for. I'm glad you told me that because I thought that what it meant was like buy one, lose one. I guess not. So here, the biggest changes that we see are over here in the granzymes and in the defenses. So we had already talked about these a couple days ago. The granzymes being less downregulated, the defensins being more downregulated. Actually, they're both perhaps consistent with the fact that you're breathing in fewer fragments.
We take a look at your microRNA downregulation as well. That needs to be emphasized. That's a regulatory mechanism that's being done. Go back to the other slide. Right. Look on the argonaut, just to the right of the nucleus. AGO 1, 2, 3, 4. No, just to the right of the nucleus. There you go. You almost had it. Right. There's a group of 6. Just to the right.
Oh, these, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Upregulated, downregulated. Extra microRNA, regulatory mechanism on mRNA turned down in 6 hours.
So that would be a sign that we're getting ready to increase protein synthesis also.
Not necessarily protein synthesis, I don't think, but a kind of broad spectrum reduction of vigilance of not letting some mRNAs out of the nucleus.
I see. Fantastic. Thank you. So proplatelet maturation, not a huge change. There are some changes. CD markers, there's a significant change, but not in the most important markers that we talked about. Mitochondrial protein transport, we talked about this briefly the other day. You can see there's a big upregulation starting in that, and that would suggest that perhaps that the energy production is getting ready to increase. Did I get through that okay, Jimmy?
Very good.
Okay, I didn't misrepresent you in any way, did I?
Can you go back to CD 248, 2 slides? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know this.
No,
We're looking, CD 248 is upregulated on both of them. That's the dectin or C-lectin receptor. It's looking for dectins and beta-glucans should be removed as that AO does what it does. But this is still upregulated, and you've got a way to go yet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which kind of suggests maybe fragments are not being removed.
And look at CD14, just to beat that horse. That also is upregulated on both of them.
Right.
So that's tell us about endotoxin.
It's less upregulated.
Okay.
But you're right, it's still upregulated. Okay. Study number 3. Now this one is where we took patients and we put them in a room, we checked their VCS, we put them in a room with the machine for 1 hour, and then we checked again. We actually had more than 100 samples, but some of those patients had been in for as long as even 36 hours. Vince, I think he has like a basement, he locks people in there. No, he doesn't. This is from Vince's data. By the time we took out the people who had had significantly longer than an hour, his N was 71. This is just looking at the left eye. This would be the A column, or 1.5 CPD, the B column, C column, D column, and the E column at 18 CPD. And you guys all know what CPD stands for, right? Cycles per degree of visual arc? Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
So This is the line that is blue is the before, and the line that is yellow is the after. And you can see that there's some pretty impressive improvement at some of these CPDs. Now, it was showing 16 to 111% improvement as a range. The 111% improvement is actually down here. It doesn't look like it because they're close, but that's because the 18 CPD comes out so poorly in most people that you actually had a doubling of it. And these were pretty highly significant. At every one of these, our P level was 5.7 times 10 to the negative fifth or lower. So I think you can do your Bonferroni correction all day long and they're all going to be positive. They're all going to be good. When we look at the right eye, we see really the same kind of thing, 13 to 166% improvement, and this is 2.1 times 10 to the negative sixth is our worst p-value, our highest one. For my data, not as good. In fact, you can see that there's actually, at the 3 CPD, you can see that it actually came out a little bit worse. There's several reasons for this, I think. Number one, N equals 21. Number two, we are doing it in a water damaged area. Number three, I have a lot more patients in my group that are not SIRS patients versus SIRS patients. So as we get bigger numbers, we'll parse out all those different things. And my data with only N equals 21 was only significant here at the 12 CPD, or in the D column. You can see a change. And it's pretty much the same in the right eye, only here the significance was in the A column, and you can see quite a bit of difference. Now when you mix our data together, and again it's a mixed bag of data, you can see that we have some pretty significant improvements, even though my data is not as robust as Vince's. My data is not as robust as Vince's is. You can still see that there's some clear separation between them. Our p-values combined are still very impressive. And
Before you go on, it's great to see that Vincent and you are using conversion scores that you had not been doing before. I salute you for that extra work. May I request that you develop and use a sigma plot to present those data so they'll be paralleling the VCS curves that are published. One issue is that what we haven't seen is shifting of the curve to the left. The sigma plot can show a little bit better than your marker does.
Okay, we'll do. Right. And then the final is the right eye. And again, we see basically the same kind of improvement. Not quite as significant in one, but all in all, very significant. And I'd like to thank our contributors, Vince Neil, who did the majority of the work, Dr. Shoemaker, Dr. Jimmy Ryan, for ProGeneDx, David Larkin, and Gianni Rossini from EnviroBiomics and Mold. We had a couple of contributors, Steve Johnson and Chris Neal from Australia, and then so thank you very much.
And it's 11 cubic feet per minute on the 1,000 to 3,000 in the U.S. models that we sell.
11?
11 CFM.
Dennis.
When you first were describing this device, did you suggest that it was producing positive and negative, or it's producing electrons, positive and negative?
Positive and negative.
So could the mechanism of action be similar to cholestyramine, electron donation?
It's a possibility, and there are a number of articles that suggest that negative ions actually improve health, but we haven't got near enough data to show anything like that yet.
So I guess the question is, I suppose you could find a way to produce more negatively charged electrons, you might have a better outcome?
Perhaps.
Well, the fact that if it produces ions, if the ions are in fact, they're distributing very quickly throughout the room, and if the effect is that the ions are decontaminating the room, then the flow really is not important going past the bulb. But I don't know, to say the ions are going and doing something, whatever is in the room,
I mean, would ions flow at a different rate than the flow in general?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that might explain some of the abnormalities in it.
I think in the theory that what they talk about is that those ions bind to the fragments and drop them to the ground. So
I don't know. how
I
that
could
would
see that
happen
doing
if they're-
that with a smaller, semi-volatile organic compound produced by mold or bacteria. I can't see that happening with a big particle. That'd be a lot of ions, and they only last blink of an eye. So that's why I'm thinking it pulls something with little resistance in with the fan it has, and attaches at that point, and then if it doesn't attach, those ions are done. Just a short distance from the machine. They don't just keep filling the room up with ions.
Awesome. Well, we have a lot more work to do.
Yes.
Jimmy, could you comment before we move on, the changes in DNA activation/suppression over 6 hours, does that happen?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, is that clear that it's that fast? And if we had unlimited finances, how long would it have taken to show a change in, say, large ribosomal subunit if we did that every hour?
I just don't know. I wouldn't want to guess. I don't know how fast it changes, but things change by the minute. If the stimulus is strong enough, it's going to force a change very quickly. But that change going in at the gene expression level, it'll force a change very quickly, but then that has to still flow through the normal channels to be made into a protein to actually result in a functional endpoint for someone. The gene expression changes are not functional at all. They're just an intermediary step, so that's what we're measuring, the step that's going to a functional endpoint, and so we're not actually measuring the endpoint.
Awesome. Well, this was just set up as a pilot study. What we obviously need to do is sit down and talk about these kind of results and design a well-designed study and go forward with it and have some measurable endpoints.
Does anyone measure interferons? Is that anything?
Did you do a DON slide for them?
I don't know. I don't remember.
I didn't have the DON slide.
Yeah. That's one of the few places that we see interferon in Jimmy's reports.
But there are, we don't. So the interferon, we don't get a good measurement in the white cells because I think they're responding to interferon. They're not so much producing it as they're responding to it. So, but there are a lot of interferon-induced transcripts, which would then in the white cells, would then give us an idea of interferon environment.
All right. Well, thank you.